But let's get back into the thing before I was so rudely interrupted by an alarm that sort of made me stop right in the middle when I had a really good video going talking about intuition and instinct. But I want to focus mostly on intuition now. All that intuition really is just pattern recognition. It's something that comes from experience. If you work with people, like I've had to, a lot of times I would use my intuition when it came to dealing with things, knowing when to do something, what to do, what decisions to make. You could be in a situation where you had to make very quick decisions just like that. You had to make decisions that could be life or death. And sometimes you know exactly what you need to do. You just know. And if somebody asked you to explain, you couldn't explain it right there. You just couldn't come up with an explanation. You just knew. But it's not really such a strange thing. It's just a matter of when you do certain things. It's one thing I even learned this with language. You just do things. And sometimes the less you think and the more you just let things flow, the better things come out. You do things better intuitively. I remember, a few years ago when I went to Spain. I speak Spanish. But the thing is that a lot of times when I would speak in Spanish, it was always a strain because I would actually do what you shouldn't do. You have to overcome this process when you're learning Spanish. Once you learn enough stuff, you should be able to just speak. But sometimes you get to this point where you think of the words in English, and then you translate them out in your mind in Spanish, and then you say them. And it's always like you're constantly checking and monitoring everything in your mind. And I don't know, for whatever reason, maybe because I was just relaxed, I was in a good mood, whatever. I was in a train station, at the train station in Madrid, and I had to buy tickets. I actually had like something like a 30-day pass or something like that, a Euro pass, I think it was. And for whatever reason, like the first time ever, I just spoke Spanish without thinking first in English. It's like I was thinking in Spanish. And the words just flowed out. And, it's like I'm doing this whole transaction and everything with the woman. And I remember her flirting with me a little bit. Anyway, that's beside the point. That's not really important. But the thing was that, it wasn't until like a minute later I stopped and thought after I finished with all this. I said, wow, this is the first time I just spoke Spanish without thinking about it first. And it kind of slows you down when you think about things. It's almost like you're unsure of yourself. You're not certain about what it is you're going to do, but you know how to do something. You know how to do it, but you think about it first. And then you get to this point where you stop thinking about it and you just let everything flow out. You just kind of do it. There's a pattern thing in there. Because you get the patterns from practice and doing. I guess it would be true in like any kind of art. See, using, painting, for example, it becomes an intuitive thing. If someone would have asked me how to paint a particular thing, I really couldn't tell you. It's not that, obviously I know how to do it because I can do it. But I can't explain it. It's like I cannot put it into words. And I have to think about it. How would I explain that? That's always a funny thing to me when I look back on things and say, well, how would I explain that? I say, obviously I can do it, but how do I put that into words? How do I explain to a person? How do you paint something? How do you make something a certain way? But intuition is a matter of pattern recognition. When you do things long enough, you just know. There's a kind of knowing. But it's something that, it's a process, really. Intuition is always looked at as this very mysterious thing. And people often use it when they talk about religion. I'm thinking about, somebody who I know who really is strongly against that word. Whenever you use the word intuition, he just like, seems to go nuts. Flies into something of a rage because I guess it's so associated with religion. People say, well, you just know God intuitively. And you just know, so therefore he can't disconnect religion and intuition as being together. But, it is a feeling thing. It's just a feeling thing. But it's a feeling thing based on something very real. And there's been research done on this. I was thinking when I was reading this book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And I'm reading a little bit about intuition. Intuition, it kind of led me to think about something. Because I've been thinking about that whole thing about how do we know things? And some things in this world seem like they're things we're not really taught. We just know. We just know things. Well, there are things that you do have to learn by practice. But once you practice something, it becomes second nature. That's a term that we like to use. It's not a very scientific word, second nature. But not everything has to be put in scientific terms. You just know how to do it. Someone was asking me once, how do you know when to shift gears in a car? You just know. I used to have a Honda, and it was stick shift, but it didn't have a tachometer. I had another car that had a stick shift, and it had a tachometer, and some people use that. When it gets to that red thing, you just shift the gear. But the other one, you just know from the sound of the engine. And I was trying to explain to that person, but there's no way I could explain it. We'd have to get in the car, and I'd have to drive it and show you how to, listen to the sound of the engine. After a while, you just do it automatically. When you hear that sound, you're not even thinking about it. You shift the gears right at the right time. You learn. But it takes working with things in the world. So it isn't just that you didn't learn. But the process itself is something that's built into our minds. That intuitive thing. I don't even know how to explain intuition. I don't even know how to describe it. And I don't think anybody can really describe what it is. But it seems to be a kind of knowing that is hard to put into words and hard to explain. It's interesting. If other people want to talk about that and, talk about what do you think about intuition, that'd be great. Because it's a good thing to talk about, to sort of look at it. And I don't think that, as one other person had argued about with like intuition versus reason, like as if these things were in opposite fields, like, they were fighting each other. No, I think you can have intuition combined with reason. That's like adding something. It's like having something that is great. Because I think if you try to do things in life with just intuition alone, you have problems. And if you do things with reason alone, you have problems. But when you combine intuition and reason, that's a great combination. That's my thoughts on it. What do you think?